Insane Apple products that never launched. For many years, Apple has been at the forefront of product invention and introduction to the general public. However, there are some products that Apple has never launched, so what are those products? Stay tuned, we will reveal them soon, and trust me, some of them are really interesting. So welcome to Techverse, you all. We are back with another interesting video. Here today, we are going to reveal unreleased Apple products. So sit back and relax, because this one is going to be really exciting. AirPower. Apple never released AirPower, a product it promised would be available in 2018. If you're unfamiliar, Apple unveiled AirPower at its September 2017 iPhone event, which was supposed to allow iPhone, Apple Watch, and AirPods owners to charge all three devices wirelessly at the same time. Apple stated that it would be available in 2018, but it never was. It's an unusual omission for Apple, which normally follows through on product announcements. Apple did not mention AirPower or its status at any of its events this year, including one in March where it revealed new iPads, its developer conference in June, the annual iPhone event in September, and a Mac event in October. Some people attempted to ask Apple at the iPhone launch if the company planned to discuss AirPower publicly, but a representative stated that the day's events were only focused on the products discussed on stage, the iPhone XS, iPhone XS Max, and the iPhone XR, and not other devices. After the September 2018 iPhone event, Apple mysteriously began removing all references to AirPower from its website. Around the same time, plugged-in Apple writer John Gruber speculated that AirPower was experiencing overheating issues and had been scrubbed. That indicates AirPower was getting too hot while charging three devices at once. Some engineers looked at AirPower's concept and said it could never operate thermally. I suspect they've had to go back to the drawing board and start over with a whole different design, or they've decided to quit up and just don't want to admit it, Gruber remarked at the time. AirPower would have been appealing to consumers who frequently purchase Apple products. Instead of plugging in an iPhone, Apple Watch, and AirPods, all three may be placed on a pad and charged wirelessly. Apple would have needed to release a new wireless charging case for AirPods, which might still be included in a future model. In recent years, Apple has been vocal about its desire for wireless accessories. In 2016, Apple removed the headphone port from the iPhone 7 to promote their wireless earbuds, AirPods. The next year, the business included wireless charging in its new iPhone models. Apple Interactive Television Box. The Apple Interactive Television Box was a set-top box developed in collaboration with a number of national telecommunications companies, including British Telecom and Belgacom. From 1994 to 1995, prototypes of the device were tested in portions of the United States and Europe, but the product was scrapped shortly after and was never mass-produced or commercialized. The set-top box was created to serve as a bridge between the consumer and an interactive television provider. The unit's remote control would let a user select what content would be displayed on a connected television, as well as provide fast-forward, rewind, and other capabilities. It is analogous to the current satellite receiver or TiVo unit in this way. Unlike TiVo, the STB would merely forward the user selections to a central content server rather than releasing the material itself. There were also plans for game shows, educational material for youngsters, and other types of content made available by the device's interactive capabilities. Copeland. At Apple, Copeland was essentially an existential nightmare. With good reason. Author Owen Linsmeyer titled his chapter on the product, The Copeland Crisis, in his excellent and long overdue book, Apple Confidential. For years, Apple consumers and workers correctly argued that Macs provided a significantly superior user experience than PC owners enjoyed. When news got out about Windows 95, Apple realized it needed to drastically redesign its operating system in order to keep up with Microsoft's developments. The Mac operating system needed to be more than merely marginally ahead. With Macs costing far more than PCs and losing market share, Cupertino needed to really push things forward. With Mac OS Copeland, Apple tried to stay ahead of Windows 95. In March 1994, Apple released Mac OS Copeland. It intended to be a complete top-to-bottom rethink of the Mac OS, named after American composer Aaron Copland, years before Steve Jobs completed it with the Unix-based OS X. It contained many features that consumers will recognize today. These included a Spotlight-like live search in the toolbar and more robust multitasking. It even allowed many people to log in, each with their own desktop and permissions. While this is now standard, it was unheard of at the time. Copeland, in keeping with this customization, was also themable. Users might select their favorite theme. A dark mode style futuristic design was available, as well as a brighter, more kid-friendly theme. Visual embellishments intended to an interface that used 3D shading and color in a way that Macs had never seen before. Mac OS Copeland added the ability to reduce windows by dragging them to the bottom of the screen, where they became tabs, similar to the functionality of today's dock or Windows taskbar. Another significant change is that Copeland was supposed to be a PowerPC native, with older programs running through an emulator. So what went wrong with the Mac OS Copeland? Mac OS Copeland was never published by Apple. Following the beta version in November 1995, the corporation continued to push back the release date for the complete version. It was originally scheduled for 1996, and it was pushed back to 1997. The Copeland budget was steadily increasing as full-fledged feature creep set in. The longer Apple delayed it, the more it felt compelled to promise new features to justify the delay. With a yearly budget of $250 million, 500 engineers worked on Mac OS Copeland in 1996. Have you ever heard the phrase, too big to fail? Copeland was too huge to fail. When Apple disclosed a startling $740 million loss that year, CEO Gil Amelio took the stage at the Worldwide Developers Conference and stated that Copeland would be released as a series of improvements rather than a single unified release. Apple effectively shelved the project a few months later. Star Trek, Apple's first Mac OS on Intel project. Apple's first proposal to migrate the Macintosh to Intel hardware did not begin with Mac OS X. It started in 1985, shortly after Steve Jobs left Apple. Apple's management soon killed the project, but it would be revived some years later in a joint effort by Novell and Apple to transfer the Mac OS to the x86 chip. In 1992, Microsoft debuted Windows 3.1, which immediately became the best-selling program in the business. The new operating system posed a threat to both Novell and Apple. Novell was concerned that the new version of Windows, particularly the upcoming release of Windows NT, might interfere with their NetWare product, which had a near monopoly in PC networks. Apple was also under attack. Windows was not as simple to use as Macs, but Windows PCs were less expensive, and Windows could run normal DOS software without the requirement of add-on cards or emulation. Novell began work on updating Digital Research's GEM, widely known as the Atari ST's graphical environment, and transforming it into a competitor to Windows. Novell's legal department became concerned about the project and ordered it canceled, believing that an improved GEM would result in a lawsuit from Apple. Daryl Miller, then vice president of marketing at Novell, proposed to Apple CEO John Sculley that the Mac OS be ported to Intel processors. Sculley was overjoyed by the offer because he wanted Apple to transition away from the expensive hardware sector and become a software supplier. Star Trek was the name given to the project to bring the Mac OS to the Intel 486 on Valentine's Day in 1992. The initiative was improved by Intel CEO Andy Grove, who was concerned about Microsoft's dominance in the PC market. Apple's leadership set a deadline of October 31st, Halloween, for building a workable Star Trek prototype. The team began work on adapting the Mac OS to Intel processors. The task was time-consuming. To make the computer speedier and utilize less disk space, much of the Mac OS was built on 6800 assembly code. This code had to be completely redone for the 486. Other components of the operating system were simpler. Most of the interface elements were written in Pascal and just needed minor changes. Other technical challenges had to be overcome in order to adapt the Mac OS to Intel processors. The software was significantly reliant on the ROMs and Macs, which held much of the operating system and governed how many GUI elements function. Because creating new ROMs for PC users would be prohibitively expensive, the researchers incorporated the ROMs in software, loading them on startup. This functionality would not be included in Macs until the iMac debuted in 1998. The crew met its target and had a working demo available by December 1st, 1992. Apple execs were astounded to see the Finder running on a regular PC. More than that, the engineers converted QuickDraw GX and QuickTime to x86. With the first goal of the project fulfilled, the engineers went on vacation to Mexico, and management at Apple and Novell began to plan how to finish the project. Unfortunately, Apple's control over John Sculley ended in the middle of the Star Trek project. Michael Spindler, Apple's new CEO, was uninterested in converting the Mac OS to x86, and spent the majority of Apple's efforts preparing System 7 for the PowerPC. The Star Trek project was shelved, and the Mac OS would not operate natively on Intel until Apple purchased Next in 1996, which already had an x86-based operating system. So guys, that's all for today's video. If you like this video, then give the video a thumbs up and smash that subscribe button so that you will never miss any update.